The hum of the fluorescent lights in the hallways of St. Jude's Children's Hospital was a familiar, almost comforting sound to Keanu. He'd been coming here for years, unannounced, no cameras, no fanfare. It was a place where the real heroes weren't on a movie screen, but in tiny beds, fighting battles most adults couldn't fathom. He liked the quiet moments, reading a story to a little girl with wide, curious eyes, or just sitting with a teenage boy who found solace in talking about motorcycles. Tonight was no different. He'd slipped in through a side entrance, a simple black baseball cap pulled low, the worn leather of his favorite jacket feeling like a second skin. He was just another visitor, another quiet presence in the hushed corridors of the oncology ward. He was in the middle of a heated game of Uno with a 7-year-old named Leo, a kid with a spirit 10 times the size of his frail body. Leo was cheating, blatantly, and Keanu was letting him. The boy's laughter, a bright, pure sound in the sterile room, was worth more than any winning hand. "Read you and weep, dude," Leo declared, slamming down a draw 4 card with a triumphant grin. Keanu feigned a look of utter devastation, clutching his chest. "You got me, Leo. You're a shark." Just as Leo was about to celebrate his victory with a juice box, a sudden, jarring sound echoed from the hallway. A loud bang, followed by a series of frantic shouts. It wasn't the clumsy drop of a bedpan or the clatter of a food tray. It was sharper, more violent. Keanu's head snapped up, his playful demeanor vanishing in an instant. He instinctively placed a calming hand on Leo's shoulder, who had frozen, the juice box halfway to his lips. "Stay here, Leo. Don't make a sound." His voice was low, steady, a stark contrast to the rising panic he could hear filtering through the closed door. He moved to the door, pressing his ear against the cool wood. The shouts were clearer now. Harsh, angry voices, speaking in a language he didn't recognize, but the tone was universal. It was the sound of aggression, of control being taken by force. Then, he heard the unmistakable, terrifying click of a rifle's safety being switched off. His blood ran cold. This wasn't a random act of violence. It was organized. It was an invasion. He had to think. His mind, trained to break down fight sequences and intricate stunts, started working on a different kind of choreography. The safety of these children was now the only thing that mattered. He wasn't John Wick. He didn't have a hidden arsenal or a network of assassins on speed dial. He was just a man in a children's hospital, but he was a man who couldn't, stand by and do nothing. He peered through the small, reinforced window of the door. He saw them. 3 men, dressed in dark tactical gear, their faces obscured by ski masks. They were herding the night shift nurses, their movements brutally efficient. One of the nurses, a kind woman named Maria who had earlier offered him a cup of coffee, met his eyes for a fleeting second. Her look was one of pure terror. That look solidified his resolve. He wasn't just going to protect Leo. He was going to protect all of them. He was on the night shift now. Part 2. Keanu backed away from the door, his mind racing. He scanned the room, his eyes cataloging every object, every potential tool, every possible advantage. A metal force stand. A heavy-duty oxygen tank. The solid wood of the visitor's chair. It wasn't much, but it would have to be enough. He glanced at Leo, who was watching him with wide, frightened eyes. Keanu offered him a small, reassuring smile, though his heart was pounding against his ribs like a trapped bird. "It's okay, Leo. We're just going to play a new game. It's called Quiet as a Mouse." Leo, trusting as ever, nodded, his little face a mask of solemn concentration. He needed to know what he was up against. How many were there? What was their goal? He couldn't risk leaving the room, not yet. He pulled out his phone, his fingers flying across the screen, dimming the brightness to its lowest setting. No signal. Of course, they would have used a jammer. These guys were professionals. He slipped the useless phone back into his pocket. He was on his own. He thought about the layout of the hospital. He'd been here enough times to have a mental map. The oncology ward was on the 3rd floor, a self-contained unit. That was both good and bad. Good, because it limited the immediate area he had to worry about. Bad, because it meant they were isolated, cut off from the rest of the hospital, from any potential help. He could hear the intruders moving down the hall, their heavy boots thudding against the linoleum. They were checking rooms, their voices a low, menacing rumble. He had to make a move, and he had to make it now. He gestured for Leo to hide under the bed, a silent command the boy immediately obeyed. Keanu then turned his attention to the force stand. It was light, but the base was solid steel. He unscrewed the pole from the base, his movements deft and silent. He was left with a short, heavy metal rod. Not a weapon, not really, but it was better than his bare hands. He positioned himself behind the door, his body pressed against the wall, every muscle coiled, every sense on high alert. The doorknob began to turn. The click of the latch was deafening in the silence. The door swung open, and a man in a ski mask stepped in, a semi-automatic rifle held at the ready. For a split second, the man's eyes scanned the empty bed, a flicker of confusion in his posture. That was all the time Keanu needed. He exploded from his hiding spot, a blur of motion. He brought the metal rod down in a brutal, efficient arc, striking the man's wrist. The rifle clattered to the floor. Before the man could even cry out, Keanu drove his shoulder into the man's chest, sending him stumbling backward. He followed through with a swift, disabling blow to the man's temple. The man crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Keanu didn't hesitate. He scooped up the rifle, the cold, hard steel feeling unnervingly familiar in his hands. He checked the magazine, his movements practiced and sure. He was no longer just a visitor. He was a guardian, and his shift was just beginning. Part 3. With the rifle in his hands, the dynamic shifted. He wasn't just a protector anymore. He was a hunter. He checked on Leo, giving the boy a thumbs up before carefully securing the unconscious intruder with medical tape and hiding him in a supply closet. "Stay hidden, little buddy. I'll be back," he whispered, his voice a low, reassuring growl. He then slipped out of the room, melting into the shadows of the dimly lit hallway. The hospital, once a place of healing, had become a labyrinth, a concrete jungle where he was the apex predator. He moved with a ghostly silence, his worn-out boots making no sound on the polished floor. He could hear the intruders communicating, their voices echoing from the central nurse's station. He crept closer, using the large, colorful murals on the walls as cover. He peeked around the corner of a wall adorned with a cheerful painting of cartoon animals. He saw them, for more of them, gathered around the main desk. They were agitated, their initial, smooth takeover having hit a snag. The unconscious man he'd taken out was one of their own, and his absence was clearly unsettling them. He overheard fragments of their conversation. They were after something in the hospital's research wing, a new experimental drug worth a fortune on the black market. The children, the nurses, they were just collateral, leverage to ensure their escape. A cold fury burned in Keanu's chest. These men had brought their greed and violence into a sanctuary, a place where the only currency should be hope. He wouldn't let them succeed. He wouldn't let them harm a single hair on a single child's head. He knew he couldn't take them all on at once, not in a direct assault. He had to be smarter. He had to use the environment to his advantage. He remembered the hospital's emergency protocols, the fire alarms, the sprinkler systems. A plan began to form in his mind, a risky, desperate gambit, but one that might just work. He needed a distraction, something big enough to sow chaos among their ranks, to separate them. He spotted a fire alarm pull station on the wall not too far from his position. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot he had. He took a deep breath, his knuckles white as he gripped the rifle. He was about to step out from behind the cover when he heard a small, terrified whimper. It came from a room just a few feet away from where the intruders were gathered. A little girl, no older than 5, was peeking through a crack in her door, her face pale with fear. One of the intruders turned, his head snapping in the direction of the sound. Keanu's heart stopped. They had seen her. He had no choice. The time for stealth was over. The time for action was now. He stepped out from the shadows, the rifle raised, his voice echoing in the sudden silence. "Let her go." Part 4. The 4 men at the nurse's station spun around, their surprise quickly turning to a cold, calculated fury. They saw him, a lone figure in a baseball cap and a worn leather jacket, a rifle held with an expert steadiness. For a moment, there was a stunned silence, a tableau of disbelief. Then, the leader, a tall, broad-shouldered man with cold, dead eyes, let out a harsh, humorless laugh. "Look what we have here. A hero." He barked an order in his native tongue, and his men fanned out, taking up tactical positions, their rifles trained on Keanu. Keanu didn't flinch. He kept his eyes locked on the leader, his gaze unwavering. "Leave the hospital. Now. This is your only warning." His voice was calm, but it carried an undercurrent of lethal intent. The leader sneered. Or what? You'll shoot us all. You're one man. Keanu's response was simple, direct. I'm the one man you don't want to mess with. He knew he was outgunned, but he had something they didn't. He had a purpose beyond greed. He was fighting for the innocent lives behind those doors. He knew he couldn't hold this standoff forever. He needed that distraction. With a sudden, fluid movement, he fired a single shot, not at the men, but at the sprinkler head on the ceiling directly above them. The bullet struck true, and a moment later, the sprinkler burst, showering the intruders and their electronics in a torrent of water. The fire alarm, triggered by the sprinkler system, blared to life, its shrill cry echoing through the ward. Chaos erupted. The men, momentarily blinded and disoriented, began shouting, their well-oiled machines sputtering into confusion. This was his chance. He darted back into the cover of the hallway, the blaring alarm and the hiss of the sprinklers masking his movements. He circled around, using his knowledge of the hospital's layout to his advantage. He took them down one by one, a phantom in the manufactured storm. He used the environment, a gurney sent rolling down a hallway, a fire extinguisher to create a blinding cloud, his attacks swift, brutal, and non-lethal. He was a whirlwind of controlled violence, a force of nature unleashed in the defense of the defenseless. Finally, only the leader remained. He found him in the research lab, frantically trying to open a reinforced refrigerator containing the experimental drugs. The leader spun around, his face a mask of rage and desperation. He raised his rifle, but Keanu was faster. He closed the distance in a heartbeat, disarming the man with a series of precise, lightning-fast moves he had honed on countless movie sets. But tonight, they were terrifyingly real. The rifle clattered to the floor, and the two men stood face to face, the only sounds the dripping of the sprinklers and their own ragged breaths. The fight was short, brutal, and decisive. Keanu didn't kill him. He didn't need to. He left him for the authorities, who were now swarming the hospital, their sirens a welcome song in the night. When it was all over, when the intruders were in custody and the hospital was secure, Keanu slipped away, just as quietly as he had arrived. He found Leo, still hiding under the bed, and gave him a reassuring hug. See? I told you I'd be back. He pulled his baseball cap a little lower, turning to leave before the questions, the thanks, the inevitable media storm could begin. As he walked out into the cool, pre-dawn air, he wasn't Keanu Reeves, the movie star. He was just a man who had done what needed to be done. He had taken the night shift, and in the quiet sanctuary of a children's hospital, he had been a hero, not on a screen, but in the hearts of the children he had saved.